Why do we glorify emotional coldness as strength? Why do we treat silence as wisdom, detachment as power, and distance as safety? From childhood, many of us hear the same warning in different words. Don't show too much. People will use it against you. Tears get labeled weakness. Sensitivity is dismissed as fragility. Vulnerability becomes something to hide instead of something to honor. Culture reinforces the lesson. Phrases like, grow a thick skin, or don't wear your heart on your sleeve, echo through generations. What starts as protection slowly becomes performance, until masking emotions is mistaken for maturity. In families, workplaces, even friendships, the person who stays quiet and unshaken is seen as the one in control. The one who reveals nothing is imagined as untouchable. Pop culture cements this illusion. The unflinching hero who never cries, the business titan who sacrifices closeness for success, the lone figure walking away from flames without turning back. These images sell us the idea that invincibility means being unmoved, that real strength is to care less, feel less, and show nothing at all. And yet beneath that polished surface, something fragile waits. Emotional coldness, practiced long enough, begins to hollow. The one who never shares joy also never risks connection. The one who hides their sadness also hides their humanity. Detachment doesn't stop life's arrows. It only keeps love from getting in. What looks like protection often leaves a person most exposed, not to others, but to loneliness itself. There's a cruel irony here. The people we call unbreakable are often the ones who shatter in silence. They don't ask for help, because asking feels like failure. They don't show pain, because pain has been relabeled as shame. The applause they receive for composure only deepens the cost. Outwardly admired, inwardly isolated, respected, but never truly known. Think about how often we mistake fear for strength. The refusal to trust looks like independence, but is really avoidance. The unwillingness to love deeply looks like discipline, but is really self-preservation born of old wounds. The mask of coldness doesn't make someone untouchable, it makes them unreachable, and the longer it stays in place, the harder it becomes to remember what lies beneath. The human spirit cannot thrive in numbness. It longs to feel, to connect, to risk. Strength is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to face it without being consumed. Coldness may silence the outside world for a while, but it also silences the warmth that makes life worth living. What we often celebrate as stoicism conceals something much costlier, emptiness disguised as armor. So when we ask why we glorify emotional coldness, maybe the better question is, what are we afraid of losing if we let the mask fall? Connection, control, or just the illusion that being untouched makes us stronger? In truth, it only makes us lonelier, because behind the silence, behind the still face, behind the tightly controlled exterior, the reality is simple. Coldness is not protection, it is absence, a void mistaken for power. What happens to the emotions we refuse to face? Do they dissolve with time? Or do they wait, quiet, hidden until they return in another form? We like to believe repression is control, that burying a feeling makes us stronger than it. But the truth is, what we bury doesn't die. It festers, it grows roots in the dark, and eventually it finds its way back. Unacknowledged grief doesn't disappear, it disguises itself as irritability or exhaustion. Anger swallowed long enough begins to twist inward, curdling into depression. Fear denied and dismissed mutates into anxiety that grips the chest without warning. Even the body carries the weight through headaches, stomach pain, and unexplained fatigue. Repression is never silent, it always speaks, just not in ways we want to hear. Psychology has long shown the cost of this denial. Carl Jung warned that what we resist persists. The ego tells us to push away what feels unsafe. It builds walls promising protection, but those same walls become prisons. They don't just keep out fear or sadness, they block joy, love, and vitality. The ego thinks it's shielding us. In reality, it's locking us inside. Think of the person who insists they are fine no matter what. To the outside world, they look resilient, untouchable. But resilience without expression isn't strength, it's suppression. The structure looks solid until a single crack appears. Then the entire system collapses. That's the fragility of rigid defenses. They cannot bend, so when life presses too hard, they break, and when they break, the consequences cut deep. People who deny their emotions often find themselves consumed by loneliness, even in crowded rooms. Alienation creeps in, not because others are absent, but because their authentic self is missing. The numbness that once felt like safety turns into isolation. They lose connection, not only with others, but with their own inner life. It's a cruel paradox. The more we deny, the more we lose. What was meant to shield us from pain ends up stripping us of meaning. What looks like resilience from the outside is in truth a slow erosion within. Denial doesn't just keep wounds hidden, it keeps them from ever healing. Imagine carrying a box you never open, convinced that sealing it makes it disappear. You grip it tighter, never realizing the weight is shaping your posture, your pace, your freedom. The denial becomes part of you, heavy, invisible, until you no longer know where the box ends and where you begin. This is the cost of repression, anxiety that has no name, anger that leaks out in unexpected places, depression that feels like an endless horizon, a body aching without reason, a spirit cut off from its own source. What starts as self-protection ends as self-betrayal. The lesson is heavy, but necessary. Emotions denied are never gone. They return as symptoms, as illness, as shadows in the mind. They remind us again and again that resilience is not silence, it is confrontation. To feel may be painful, but refusing to feel is far more destructive. Coldness may look like strength, denial may look like discipline, but what we refuse to face will always find us again, and when it does, it demands a higher price than we ever imagined. We're taught to believe strength means rejection, cutting off, shutting down, picking a side, and never looking back. But resilience isn't about discarding what makes us uncomfortable. It's about integration, about standing in the pull of opposites without collapsing into either extreme. Carl Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to hold contradictions without breaking under them. Life is never clean, and people are never simple. Love coexists with disappointment. Forgiveness wrestles with anger. Boundaries live alongside intimacy. When we exile one side to protect the other, we shrink. But when we hold both, something larger emerges. Think of a bowstring, too loose, and the arrow falls before it flies. Too tight, and the string snaps. Real power only comes when the string holds both forces at once, pulled back, stretched but unbroken. That tension isn't weakness, it's what makes aim and release possible. Relationships work the same way. To love someone deeply doesn't mean dissolving into them. It means standing close while keeping your own outline intact. Distance doesn't erase love, it preserves it. A boundary isn't rejection, it's the frame that makes connection clear, the container that allows affection to breathe instead of suffocate. Forgiveness carries this paradox too. To forgive isn't to forget or excuse, it's refusing to let bitterness write the future. But forgiveness without boundaries becomes surrender, and boundaries without forgiveness harden into resentment. Transformation lives in that tension, where compassion meets protection, where release and remembrance hold each other without erasing. Music offers the same lesson. Notes alone aren't music. Silence alone isn't music. Only together, sound and silence, presence and absence, does melody exist. The rests between the notes give shape to the song. Our contradictions aren't flaws in the design, they are the structure itself. Integration isn't about erasing differences, it's about finding harmony. When we refuse this tension, we break. Some collapse into closeness, losing themselves in devotion that erases identity. Others collapse into distance, guarding themselves so fiercely they starve intimacy. Both are forms of escape. True transformation asks more. It asks us to hold the paradox until it reshapes us into something stronger than either side alone could provide. This isn't easy. It feels unnatural to embrace contradiction without naming a winner. The mind craves simplicity, but the soul demands complexity. To sit with opposites is to sit with discomfort. Yet within that discomfort, growth begins. Jung believed wholeness depends on this tension. Without it, we remain split between shadow and light, unable to carry the fullness of our humanity. Picture standing at the shoreline, where land and ocean press against each other without merging completely. The boundary isn't confusion, it's creation. Every wave reshapes it, yet it remains the meeting point. Our inner lives work the same way. Where opposites meet, transformation begins. Resilience isn't the absence of conflict, it's the strength to remain steady while conflict moves through us. To hold love and anger, tenderness and strength, forgiveness and caution, without choosing exile. That isn't collapse, that is transcendence. And when we finally live in that space, something shifts. We stop being split apart by contradictions and start being expanded by them. We stop chasing the illusion of clean answers and begin inhabiting the power of paradox. And in that paradox, the fractures we once feared reveal themselves as the very lines that make us whole. What if pain was never meant to be wasted? What if every wound, every betrayal, every loss wasn't the end of something, but the raw material for transformation? For Carl Jung, this wasn't just a comforting thought, it was the foundation of his psychology. He turned to the ancient language of alchemy, the art of turning lead into gold, as a metaphor for the inner life. In this vision, the lead is not metal, but the heavy weight of human suffering, the shame we bury, the anger we repress, the grief we silence. These are the substances no one wants to touch. They feel crude, toxic, contaminating. But Jung believed they hold the potential for the most precious transformation if we dare to face them. The alchemist's fire is the heat of life itself. It is betrayal burning through our illusions until boundaries become unshakable. It is grief consuming us, only to leave behind a tenderness that lets us recognize pain in others. It is despair hollowing us out, creating space for empathy to grow. What once seemed like endings reveal themselves as beginnings in harsh disguise. This is individuation, the movement toward wholeness. It isn't about chasing perfection or eliminating flaws. It's about weaving shadow and light into one fabric, so the parts we once rejected no longer operate in secret. The anger we denied becomes strength. The fear we buried becomes caution without paralysis. The vulnerability we hated becomes the bridge that allows others to meet us in truth. Take betrayal. At first it feels like poison. It corrodes trust, shatters identity, and leaves us questioning everything. But if worked through, betrayal becomes the crucible where boundaries are forged. It teaches us where we end and another begins. It clarifies the difference between love and control, loyalty and submission. What once broke us becomes the reason we cannot be broken in the same way again. Grief carries the same paradox. It devastates, yet it also refines. The absence of someone we love is unbearable, but in that weight we learn compassion. We stop taking presence for granted. We begin to recognize the silent struggles of others, because loss has carved those shapes inside us too. The fire does not erase love, it distills it into something deeper, quieter, enduring. Even failure, which most of us fear, can be alchemical. The collapse of plans may taste like ashes, but those ashes are fertile. They force us to ask new questions, redirect our energy, and grow roots where once we only reached outward. Gold is never handed to us. It's smelted from the ruins of what we thought life should be. Transformation doesn't come quickly. The alchemists worked in stages, dissolving, burning, refining, recombining. So it is with the psyche. First, denial dissolves. Then anger burns, reflection refines, finally, integration recombines what was broken into something new. Each stage feels like destruction, but each is construction by another name. The imagery is powerful, a crucible glowing in fire, base matter bubbling until it releases impurities. Our lives are those crucibles, the heat is our suffering, the container is our willingness to endure without turning away, and the gold, when it finally appears, is not perfection but depth, an inner solidity no easy life could provide. The heavy becomes light, the broken becomes strong, the rejected becomes essential. This is not poetry, it is survival transformed into meaning. Jung's insight still holds. Suffering is not just to be endured, it is to be transformed. Pain is not the enemy, it is the forge, and those who choose to step into it, who work with the fire instead of fleeing from it, emerge carrying something more valuable than certainty. They carry wisdom, and so the alchemy of pain reveals its final truth. The very wounds we thought would define our weakness become the gold that defines our strength. When opposites finally meet inside us, when shadow and light are no longer enemies, something remarkable happens. We no longer need to hide behind stone walls. The armor of coldness, once mistaken for strength, falls away. What emerges instead is what Carl Jung might have called transparent shielding, the ability to be both untouchable and warm, both guarded and open. This shield isn't forged from iron or distance, it's made of clarity. To carry it is to walk into the world, knowing who you are, what you value, and what you will no longer sacrifice. It means you can welcome others without being consumed by them. You can feel deeply without being undone by what you feel. Think of it this way. Glass may be fragile when thin, but when tempered it becomes remarkably strong. It can bear storms and weight, yet still let light through. That is transparent shielding, a resilience born not from rejection, but from integration. You are no longer defined by the cold walls of survival. You are defined by the warmth that flows through them. This way of being transforms how we move through relationships. You no longer silence your voice just to belong. You no longer pour out energy simply to keep others comfortable. You no longer confuse loyalty with self-betrayal. Instead, you meet people as you are, authentic, self-aware, and rooted. What passes through your shield is chosen, not imposed. What stays outside is not loss but protection. It is a quiet power, almost invisible. A smile is still a smile, but it carries no mask. A boundary is drawn, not with anger, but with steadiness. Silence is no longer avoidance, it is space reclaimed, and in that space, life expands again. You find yourself available for joy, creativity, and connection, because your energy no longer leaks through cracks you pretended weren't there. The shift is subtle, but profound. People around you feel it. Some will respect it, adjusting naturally to your strength. Others may recoil, uneasy with a version of you they can no longer control. But even this is clarity. The transparent shield shows you, without words, who belongs in your life and who does not. This is resilience redefined, not the brittle toughness that shatters under pressure, not the numbness that confuses absence with peace. It is wholeness that stands steady, no matter the storm. You don't need to prove it. You don't need to announce it. The proof is in how you live, present but not consumed, strong but not closed. Picture it one last time, not a fortress with iron gates, but a house of clear glass on a hill. Light streams in, you can see out, others can see in, and yet the structure is solid, unshakable, built to endure. That is the image of a life lived with transparent shielding, not hidden, not hardened, whole. And so the journey comes full circle. Strength was never in coldness. It was never in silence, denial, or withdrawal. True strength lies in integration, welcoming every part of yourself, so that no external force can bend you out of shape. Wholeness, not walls, is the real armor. Resilience, then, is not about becoming colder. It is about becoming clearer, not a fortress but glass, not distance but presence, not rejection but acceptance. And with that, you step forward, no longer burdened by the myths of toughness. Light passes through you, warmth radiates from you, and still you remain unshakable. That is the power of a transparent shield.